Okay, wonderful. Oh, this slideshow. Oh, there we go. Excellent.
Okay. So, in my presentation, I think it will be another on the same theme of the shame and honor, but with another variation. Maybe it is too French, my presentation, but I can reassure you that my French colleague would find it too American or too English. So don't be afraid about the Frenchness. Anyway, if we consider rape is, of course, an important topic, and this is why we are here, especially in relation with in relation to ethnicity. However, if we ask the question of how ordinary man can turn into rapist in ethnic conflict, the issue must concern medical anthropology and various biological, sex drive, behavioral, psychological, or evolutionary approaches. On the other hand, in my approach, I would ask the question how rape becomes an efficient instrument as a weapon of ethnic cleansing. In this sense, rape must concern public culture and a more political approach. One way of approaching rape is, for example, during the notorious ethnic conflict in former Yugoslavia, has been to explain mass rapes against the cultural background of people involved in conflict, among other things, by using local concepts such as blood ideology and family honor. If we talk about family honor, we know that honor work in this way. Rape will bring shame, which must be corrected to restore honor family. And if we know that this shame cannot be corrected, as Deborah Berghofen showed very well in her presentation, so we know how we can have an idea how difficult is to live with rape, and how difficult is to restore honor. But this is the crux of explanation in this, is that rape works as an instrument of ethnic cleansing exactly because it brings social pollution through the shame. The problem is that honor in this model of explanation is reified as a moral system instead of being considered as a political resource. In this sense, for example, it is became famous, the depiction of Southeast European societies through the Ismail Kadare novels Broken Up April. Maybe you have heard about it, but it became famous, and characters like those depicted in the Ismail Kadare novel are taken at face value as if Southeast European people are like this character. We know that these are fictional characters, and people like that can hardly be found in real life. In addition, it can be observed that claims of opposed faction are often similarly phrased, revealing both the rule of the game if we can call it like this, and the degree to which actors are prepared to commit and tolerate deviation from the prevailing rules. Mutual recrimination, for example, about sexual atrocities and other violence against human rights are evidence of at least a shared symbolism between the warring parties. So I would, instead of taking this path, I would suggest a description of ethnic mass rapes against kinship structure and kinship ideologies. I will emphasize that it will be a description and not an explanation, because rape cannot be explained. On ethical ground, to explain rape is somehow to justify it. By the way, it may be suggested the new avenue towards some potentially vigorous development in current anthropological theory. It can be shown, for example, that, and this kinship structure is shared by all people in Southeast Europe and in former Yugoslavia. Marriage and feud are constructed in the same way. Marriage, it is not considered as the relation between a woman and a man, but the relationship between two tree of bloods which share a tree of milk. And in the same way is constructed hostility and feud. Normally people who marry each other, if they have a difficulty of sharing a tree of milk, they will go to feud. So the same structure produces at the same time marriage, which is supposed to bring love, friendship, and solidarity, but also hatred, hostility, disintegration, and so on. And on one side, through the tree of blood, we have marriage, or we have feud. The ally, or called in term, the friend is the term for the local term for the allied people, is friend or guest, and is hospitality, friendship, hospitality, but also in-law, which is in-law and in-blood brother. There are the terms. And the same way, it works both ways, even bringing that, and this relationship is ambivalent and ambiguous. So if this is that, we can see that typically rape in ethnic conflict is a transaction of women exchange between competing groups of men. Rape is a forced sexual intercourse which under normal condition would be sanctioned by marriage. Indeed, just as rape is not a simple aggressive expression of sexuality, as feminist scholars have forcefully emphasized, but more a sexual expression of violence. Marriage is not only a social institution of sexual relation, but also a sexual regulation of social violence. The political significance of rape would be therefore to substitute the tree of blood legitimated by marriage for another tree of blood that, although illegitimate, is construed following the same structural pattern. From the position of structural logic, rape may be defined as a misalliance that becomes possible by the way of war and which would necessarily induce hatred, hostility, and social disintegration. At the same way that marriage becomes possible by the way of alliance that is supposed to bring love, friendship, and solidarity. This is not, however, to understand rape and marriage in a binarist and rigid structuralist relation. And there is necessary problem with this model. On empirical ground, if the metaphysical ambivalence of marriage may bring at the same time love and solidarity as well as hatred and hostility, in the case of rape, even though structurally construed like marriage, there is no ambivalence, because there is no way that rape can bring other than hatred, hostility, and disintegration. Therefore, the Aristotle logical analogy cannot be valid, and all logical constructs along these lines are misleading. Rape is unspeakable, unthinkable, and beyond human understanding. We can only account of it and test this hypothesis by an abstract mathematical operation using the catastrophic model suggested by Claude Lévi-Strauss, which would move us toward a morphodynamic approach. The theoretical project inspired by the canonical formalization in the structural analysis of myth can show that structural anthropology is intimately concerned with processes of social conflict, change, praxis, and agency. After Lévi-Strauss introduced and operationalized the method for the structural study of myth since 1955, in his massive work dealing with mythical thinking in the Mythologics series, and in more recent inquiry, he described the generative engine of myth on the basis of the set of their own transformation by means of a series of forms that are qualified with different functions. The term can be character, things, or concept, and categories that are able to take certain roles. We are talking about myth. The function are the different roles carried by this term. In mythical networks, the basic transformation that Lévi-Strauss distinguished between a number of character or term and their large number of possible roles or function can be of the kind of homology, inversion, opposition, or symmetry. He highlighted how these terms and this function are controlled in mythical thinking by means of the special relationship he formulated in a canonical way, which demonstrated how the transformation of the myth can be captured. The concept of canonical formulation transcends a simple analogical relation, which the simple Aristotle analogical relation, to a quadratic equation, which articulates a dynamic homology between meaningful elements and their propositional function. This formulation made it possible for Lévi-Strauss to detect a sort of genuine logical machine, generative of open-ended meaning within specified mythical network. And you have the canonical formula given by Lévi-Strauss. A formula of these types reflects the group of transformation in which it is assumed that a relation of equivalence exists between two situations defined respectively by an inversion of terms and relation, provided that one of the terms is replaced by its opposite and that a correlative inversion is made between the function value and the term value of two elements. In other words, in plain word, what the formula said. But what is highly relevant to this quadratic equation is the fact that the generative virtue of the so-called double twist, the two condition internal to canonical transformation in Lévi-Strauss structural of myth, are now being considered and indeed made comprehensible as an anticipated formalization of catastrophe model in new mathematics and morphodynamics. Just the anecdotic story. This formula is discovered by Lévi-Strauss in 1955. and the new catastrophic model in new mathematics are made known to the community of mathematicians at 1972, at the time when Lévi-Strauss has finished his mythologic series. By the time, no mathematician could understand what Lévi-Strauss is saying in 55, and he kept his mouth shut. He never mentioned that what it is. But all his work on mythology is based on this approach, without saying it. And after 72, some mathematicians in the 80s discovered that this Lévi-Strauss approach was an anticipated modelization of catastrophe theory. So this model is used increasingly since then in many students, in many research and studies, to account how social relations are even more mediated by and implicated in broader political processes. I believe the heuristic pertinence in Lévi-Strauss' notion of canonical formalization could reasonably stand for understanding mass rapes as an instrument of ethnic cleansing. As a matter of fact, war is a catastrophe, but rape in war is a catastrophe on its own. Accordingly, we may offer a catastrophic model to conceptualize rape by means of canonical formalization, in which the solidarity role of marriage will stand to the hostility of rape as the ambivalence of marriage stand to the rape politics of an unspeakable and unthinkable anti-solidarity. This unspeakable and unthinkable anti-solidarity cannot be observed on the ground. It is only mathematically generated through the solidarity. Still, this is not only for giving a new description, however elegant, and nothing more. For a catastrophic operation of this kind can take place, the very idea of canonical relation requires a third operating condition external to canonical formalization, which in the study of myth is expressed as the necessity of the crossing of a spatio-temporal boundary, defined in territorial, ecological, linguistic, cultural, social, or whatever terms, but which is always a boundary condition, even though often implicit and never articulated. The catastrophist operation that requires a boundary condition of this kind is claimed by Lévi-Strauss to show that a series of variations inherent in the myth of a given people cannot be fully understood without going through myths belonging to another people, which are in a relation of inverse transformation with the former. Eventually, I believe the requirement of a boundary condition in canonical formalization can anticipate the very politics of an ideological agency and discursive practice, for the lack of which structural analysis has been disregarded. Actually, during the ethnic wars in former Yugoslavia, for the notorious effectiveness of mass rape to take place as a possible instrument of ethnic cleansing, it was necessary that the value of honor were able to be forwarded by a kind of political and instrumental agency. This additional agency is provided by the increasing role of traditionalist and nationalist discourses that burst moral order and social morphology in the first place, precisely by bringing to the fore the destructive values of honor and ideology. Insofar as the politically destructive intention of rapes was in ultimately to eliminate the adverse community through its own self-destruction of a social and ethnic group. Indeed, through the introduction of shame and disgrace as a social pollution that should bring necessarily the disorder and break up of social system and group in its totality. Typically, at war, such a social pollution and catastrophic disorder is termed, in Albanian at least, shfarosje, which means total killing, but literally kinship uprooting. This makes it possible afterward for ethnicity to get converted into nationalist consciousness, for this consciousness to become organized, and for organized nationalists to become militarist, masculinist, misogynist, racist, and violent. The way in which both context and cultural background may influence the political and war strategic meaning of rape seem helpful in exploring how conception about accountability and expected gender role in a particular time and place may lead social actor to commit atrocity which transgress the moral codes of their own society. I don't have time anymore. Well, okay. Anyway.
If you would, one paragraph, maybe?
Okay,
Just one paragraph.
what I
Should have
wanted
said
to conclude is that within this approach, in this sense, there are not the macro-sociological structure that involve a traditionalism of cultural and moral value. But there is the change of power relation and that fuels such a traditionalism, while the instrumental use of both identity values as well as moral and cultural values make it possible for mass rape to become an effective weapon of ethnic cleansing.